Welcome to Cultivated Live for Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. I'm Jay Rosenthal, co-founder of Cultivated Media and host of this program, Cultivated Live. I'm here with my co-founder and our editor-in-chief, Jeremy Berke. Jeremy, welcome.
Morning, Jay. It's good to be
Good morning
here. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday to you. Since we launched Cultivated, Jeremy, you know this. Our goal has been to be cannabis industry first, providing our viewers and readers with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information. We do that a couple of different ways. We do that through our daily newsletter at Cultivated Daily. We do that through this daily live stream at Cultivated Live. So we would love if you follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, get our newsletter to your inbox at cultivated.news. And today, and a couple days the past week, we're actually streaming to your Twitter feed, or X feed, I should say. So welcome everybody on LinkedIn, YouTube, and in this case, Jeremy's Twitter. Jerry, are you ready to jump into the news?
Let's do it. Born ready.
I'm excited to talk first about Minnesota, because Minnesota is on the cusp, but maybe the state closest, well, maybe Ohio's a little bit closer, but pretty close to adult use sales. Those will kick off next year. But in advance of that, the governor signed a bill in Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz, that allows growers to start growing in advance of the adult use market. We have a quote from, he used to be the Minnesota cannabis lawyer, but now he works at Vicente, Jason Tarasek. He said, this new legislation will allow Minnesota's adult use cannabis market to finally get started in earnest. Although our hemp-derived edibles market has flourished since 2022, Minnesotans are ready to smoke homegrown cannabis. With the governor's signing of this bill, Minnesota cannabis cultivators can get growing as soon as this fall. That is good news, I think.
Seems like good news to me. Minnesota, I've been watching the Minnesota market with a lot of interest, right? Seems like they did accidentally legalize, infused beverages in 2022. They've been sold, and I haven't been to Minnesota, but they've been sold in breweries and grocery stores since then.
In restaurants,
In restaurants. And look, I think on the one hand, the sky hasn't fallen. It's not like Minnesotans have seen some, fear-mongering, uptick in traffic accidents or children being intoxicated or anything like that. On the other hand, it is time for them to come up with real consistent, coherent regulations. And I'm sure, the state legislature and the governor sees that. It is going to be a really interesting market, though. It's big, populous state. There's a lot of cannabis companies that are based in Illinois, which is right near it. And so I think they're looking at the market with interest, and so are we.
Yeah, I think so. And they do take their own approach. They also have a big hemp industry there. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. I mean, I think you may recall maybe a month ago, they did start to crack down on sale of hemp flower. I put that in quotes because I think hemp flower was just weed by another name. So it'll be interesting to see that go out. The one word of caveat, though, is that New York did a very similar thing. They allowed hemp growers to transition to be cannabis growers. And as Joe Rossi said on our program, then they promised 20 dispensaries a month to be open up to sell that product that was pre-grown, if you will. And that never happened. So the farmers actually got stuck holding the bag. I think Minnesota's probably further along and maybe even a less contentious state to open dispensaries. So that is the one caveat that comes from Joe Rossi when he's talking about New York. He used very colorful languages. He said, the cultivators got fucked was the language he used.
That's what he said. So, I mean, look, it's a good idea to have this, all the cannabis has to be grown within the state. They can't bring it from outside. You have to meet demand quickly and early. And especially as we've seen in New York, if you don't meet that demand quickly, you get into all sorts of knock-on problems, right? So look, the idea was good. Again, in New York's case, the execution didn't sort of live up to what they promised. Minnesota probably, I'm sure, is looking at that and they're trying to do a little bit better. And so, we will see. But look, this is now a known problem. And when problems are known, you can come up with better solutions to them.
They're known knowns, as
known knowns, right?
Not Dick Cheney. I'll think of his name, but yeah, there's known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. This is a known known.
Right.
Jeremy, I want to switch ahead to rescheduling, which we talk about, I don't know, every time that you are on. Yesterday, we had Joanne Caceres from Denton's, big law firm, big national law firm. She was talking about, I think it's on page 13 of the recommendation or the next process. The notice of proposed rulemaking, I guess. NPRM. She loved using that, not acronym, but initials. She highlighted something that I think is worth highlighting again. Her quote, somewhat reading between the lines, but it's kind of an open secret. There's not total agreement within the DEA that Schedule 3 is appropriate. You wrote at length about the NPRM. and sort of hinted at this, that the DEA administrator didn't actually sign off on any schedule. What's your take about what Joanne said yesterday?
Yeah, look, I think she knows more than me, right? So I'll caveat with that, but she's absolutely right. I think the DEA is not completely aligned on moving cannabis to Schedule 3. However, I've talked to a lot of experts in the last few days, people with more refined takes than I have on this. Where they have landed is that it doesn't really matter that the DEA isn't perfectly aligned on this. No, because the Attorney General signed off on this, because the Office of Legal Counsel's opinion was distinctly written and specifically written to sort of undermine, the DEA's process in this, right? Like they sort of laid down the law that or attempted to make an argument to lay down the law that the DEA is really just a law enforcement agency. They're not a scientific agency, that the drug rescheduling process ruled by the DEA is flawed from the start. And so, look, like they expect this probably to be challenged in court, and the Office of Legal Counsel opinion, which, is a long read, but an interesting read for cannabis nerds like us, is probably going to be the basis of their argument if they're challenged by the DEA. The one other thing I'll say on that is that, yes, the head of the DEA, Ed Milgram, did not sign the document. I think we saw a lot of prohibitionist groups use this as sort of like a nail in the coffin that this wasn't going to happen. We don't know what Milgram actually thinks of cannabis rescheduling, right? Like, she's a Biden appointee. It's unlikely that she would go against the Biden administration. What she's probably doing is sticking up for rank and file DEA members, saying that, she's the head of this agency. These rank and file are saying that they don't agree with this. They don't like how the process works. So she's sticking up for them, given that she knows that it's going to happen anyways because her boss, who has a lot more power and say in it, signed off on it anyways.
And her boss's boss too.
And her boss's boss, right. And her boss's boss is tweeting about it. Her boss's boss is the president of the United States. So, I think that's the other thing. The last thing I'll say on this is that, within the Office of Legal Counsel opinion, I don't want to get too into the weeds here, so to speak, but, they sort of discussed how the DEA's rescheduling process has a chicken or egg question, right? Like, if there's a Schedule 1 drug that has no accepted medical use and no way to study it, how are they going to prove that there is medical use by studying it, right? So they have to remove it from Schedule 1 to even go through that process. And so that, to me, looks like kind of a law enforcement agency having trouble with the idea that they're supposed to enforce something less rather than more. And it'll take fits and starts to get there. And look, who knows? Like, the DA is made up of former cops who, probably have, relatively conservative opinions about things and don't like legalization to start with. So it'll be interesting. I don't think it's really concerning that the DA isn't aligned on this, given the DOJ's broader stance. Again, who knows? Like this could all go sideways, I guess, is the caveat there. But
the other note she did say, especially if you're a medical patient, write in during the public comment section, get your doctors to write in as well, because that's going to be an important factor. And she's been going through all the public comment because it's all on the DEA's website. You can find it as well. We'll link to it we've linked to it in our newsletter anyway. Let's switch a little bit to South Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think I'm pronouncing that name right, signed a bill that legalizes cannabis cultivation and possession in the country. The bill, as you noted, doesn't permit cannabis sales, so people have to grow and smoke within the comfort of their own homes. But that is some progress in another country that is generally a good trend to see. Jeremy?
Yeah, look, it's funny. South Africa, they decriminalized cannabis in 2018, and part of decriminalization was, I believe it's their version of a constitutional amendment where they actually had to come up with a legalization law in 2 years. It took them 6, as with all things cannabis, but they did do it to their credit. South Africa is a big populous country. I don't know how much this really changes about, regular consumers in South Africa. Those who grew and smoked cannabis before this law probably will continue to do so. But it's another trend of normalization, right? It's the first African country to actually legalize cannabis, and it's a relatively economically powerful African country to do so. The other thing that I'm sort of looking at closely with this is this sort of alternative model of legalization that Germany, through its cannabis social clubs, is pursuing. Now South Africa, Thailand, although that is going, 2 steps backwards for every step forward. But, they're specifically choosing to not commercialize cannabis right now. I think supply needs to meet demand. And if it doesn't, it will go that supply will go untaxed and the benefits will be uncaptured by regulators. At the same time, like, there are new ideas about legalizing cannabis without commercialization. What does that look like? Will it work? I think in 5 years, we're going to have pretty interesting data sets from South Africa, Germany, Canada, the United States to look at this and see what's happened. So it's interesting.
It is interesting. I was at a cannabis conference here in Toronto yesterday, and people were like, what do you think of the European market? And my sense, and we'll see this play out or not, there will be a medical cannabis program like there is in UK and Germany as well. And then the recreational or adult use will be kind of like Germany, right? Social club based, not in commercial, even in some cases, in Germany's case, like nonprofit. So it's be very small. So to say you'd be able to scale an adult use market in Germany doesn't seem to be realistic right now. And so it is like, there's really two markets. There's medical, which looks like medical in other places. Right. And there's the adult use looks like some variation of like Amsterdam, really.
Yeah, look, no, I mean, I'm skeptical that these programs can work, right? Just purely from like a economic lens. Like, there is high demand for cannabis. You do need to have a robust supply chain, and without sort of market incentive for companies to build and fill that demand, it's going to be hard for people to access as much cannabis as they want, right? At the same time, it's an interesting idea. Like, if the worry is that, you have an industry that is trying to get, I'll sort of caricaturize the argument of people who are against cannabis companies, right? That, it's a new industry borrowing the playbook of big tobacco to get a new generation hooked on smoking a product that might not be so good for them. Like, then yes, this is an interesting model to look at. I would be interested to see how effective it is and whether it works and whether it only exacerbates, any of the negatives associated with cannabis consumption and doesn't capture the benefits. That's sort of where I land on it, but will be interesting to see. I think there'll be some, PhD thesis written about this at some point.
You said the word worried in there, and worried around cannabis. There is a Maine Republican senator, Susan Collins, who's worried. And this is a story that's come up a number of times in our newsletter. She's asking federal government officials, law enforcement specifically, to help crack down on illicit cannabis growers. This is what she told WGME in Maine. There's indication that many of them are run by Chinese cartels, and this is something that I've been pushing the federal government to help our county sheriffs, state and local law enforcement to close down these operations and arrest those involved. There's been a couple of arrests in Maine. I don't know if this is more pervasive in Maine and other places, or they just talk about it more, although Maine is particularly rural. How big a deal you think this is? And Susan Collins is an important Republican senator. Is this an issue you think that is going to get more traction than just local Maine affiliates? Or is this a trend that we're going to see whereby, let's call them foreign cartels, taking advantage of lax enforcement in the States?
Yeah, look, I think there is something to the story that there are, Chinese run cartel operations in Maine. Like, that it is certainly happening. The reporting is pretty clear. How pervasive the problem is, right? Like, it seems like it's a few hundred plants in a few hundred locations. Like, okay, sure, it's bad and it should be enforced. It's illegal. I don't think it undercuts the way Maine has regulated their cannabis industry. I don't think you can sort of draw grand conclusions from this. At the same time, like, yes, this will be absolutely an argument that Republicans who are against pot use to kind of say that regulation hasn't worked because, oh, look what's happening anyways, right? And so I think the quicker and the better that can get enforced is probably better for those who are proponents of cannabis legalization. And yes, of course, like, this is criminal activity. It has money flowing offshore to a country that is, for all intents and purposes, in a trade war with the US, right? Like, that is something that hurts our domestic policy and hurts our foreign policy. So obviously that should be enforced. Obviously it's bad. At the same time, is it such a big problem that you need Suzanne Collins, beating the drum about it? There's many other problems she could look at too.
Yes, I would look inward at her own party. In fact, for some of those unique challenges to democracy and otherwise. Jeremy, one other thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because I think it happened after we talked last week, and that is Chris Alexander. So he is the, executive director, CEO of the New York Office of Cannabis Management. In the governor's top-down review of the Office of Cannabis Management, one of the things that was clear was that he would not be reappointed come September. So that's when we last left it. Mm-hmm. Then at the end of last week, it became clear he wrote a letter in an email that the city got that basically said he's stepping down in 2 weeks. Was this inevitable? That's sort of one question. And does it change anything with sort of a revamp of the OCM, or does it actually fast track more changes?
Yeah, I don't know if it changes much at the moment. I think, once that report came out, Alexander's time at the agency, the writing was on the wall, right? When you've lost the confidence of the governor, whether that's right or wrong, but you have lost the confidence of your boss, you don't have the mandate to lead an agency, right? A couple things I'll say here, and I'll get through this pretty quickly, is one, what Alexander was trying to do was extremely hard, right? He deserves credit for his vision and trying his best to see it through. Ultimately, he was hamstrung by the tumult of New York politics and interagency fighting, the huge market that was on the line, all these companies wanting a piece of it. Like, this was going to be a fight from the start. And I think number two, there was real execution failures at the agency. Whether those were his fault, I'm not sure, but you are the head of the agency. The blame, the buck does stop with you at the end of the day. All that being said, there is this sort of argument being made that Alexander is sort of a scapegoat for the failures of what happened with New York cannabis, of the delayed rollout and all the things we reported on. Maybe that's true. Maybe there's a convincing argument there. Certainly, the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, a national advocacy group released a statement to that effect. A large caucus in the New York State Legislature also sort of outlined why they believe that Alexander was scapegoated here. So look, there are some interesting things going on. At the end of the day, good for Chris Alexander. He's got the summer to hang out with his kids and not deal with this. So, maybe there's a silver lining in it for him. But look, at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen with New York cannabis. A replacement hasn't been named yet. It's going to be a long process. There may be an interim head in the meantime. So, no, I don't know if this really does move anything forward other than give the governor someone to point a finger at and to give critics, someone to blame. I'm not sure that this is really going to fix anything. That being said, we don't know who the new leader will be yet. And so that will change a lot once we know that.
Yeah, there's the New York cannabis industry is really in flux, even as more dispensaries open and, more people have access to cannabis. We will take it'll take a couple of months, I think, to flesh out for sure about what the next steps are, who's going to be in charge, what that'll look like. Are there more overhauls to be had? Right. But we will certainly have it in our newsletter at cultivated.news.
I was going around the city yesterday. I had a bunch of meetings, class, a bunch of meetings. And look, a lot of the illicit cannabis shops are padlocked and closed. It is noticeable. They are doing it. It's the last time they tried to enforce, you just saw a little sticker on a window and the store was open, and now they are padlocked, and a lot of them are padlocked. And so look, change is happening. It'll be interesting to watch.
It's not called Operation Padlock, but it's something like Operation
Padlock to protect.
Padlock to protect. I like it. Use the alliteration. That's what the mayor's talking about. And actually, I think it was in today's newsletter, there was actually a clip of them padlocking a door. This is the OCM's Twitter feed, actually padlocking doors. So, we will see what impact that has. Part of me says that's really only part of the equation. The other is getting more open, and that's where the rub comes in. We shall see. Jeremy, as always, it's nice to see you bright and early on a Wednesday morning. We'll be back. You'll be back next Wednesday morning as well. I'll be back. Kramer from Vitrina talking cannabis retail. As always, that is it for today's Cultivated Live. We encourage you to subscribe to our daily newsletter at cultivated.news. It's also on Jeremy's shirt. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. Follow Jeremy on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter because we've been streaming there a lot. Again, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern with Krista Raymer. Buy cannabis at your local dispensary, everybody, because that's the only way the padlocks are going to work in New York. If you buy cannabis at your local dispensaries. Jeremy, have a good day. We'll see everybody tomorrow.
Thank you, Jay. Have a good one.